Hey guys, I'm back. Got a new camera and a new lighting system for Christmas, so hopefully this lighting is a little better on your eyes. This will enable me to make more videos because in the past I always had one room where the lighting was halfway decent, and with 5 kids and 9 grandkids, there was always somebody in that room either changing a baby or breastfeeding a baby or a baby sleeping. So a lot of times I had videos I want to make and couldn't make them. So now I can hide and go run to any room in the house I want to and make a video. I want to thank my son Nick. He was the one originally holding the phone back in the day, and he used to beg me to make my videos shorter because his arms used to get tired. He bought me this for Christmas, so thank you, Nick. So now, without any further ado, this video, I think my Catholic brothers and sisters are going to want to share with their Protestant friends and family members, whether on Facebook or just let them watch it, because I guarantee you what I'm about to tell you, they don't know. I was a Protestant for 25 years, and I didn't know this until after I was going deep into history, like my 25th year, where I was realizing that Catholicism was true. So I guarantee you, none of your Protestant friends are going to know this. But before you share this with them, you might have to explain to them that they are Protestant. And it's no diss on my Protestant brothers and sisters. I was a Protestant for a year before I realized I was a Protestant. So basically, you know, if someone said, "What's your religion?" I would say, "I don't have a religion. I just have Jesus. I love Jesus. I'm a Christian," or "I'm a born-again Christian," or "I'm a Bible-believing Christian." I would not even call myself an evangelical. That's a term the world put on us because we're supposed to evangelize. But in reality, most evangelicals don't evangelize. They leave it to the preachers and the evangelists. Some are on fire, and that's all they talk about. So anyway, you might want to have to explain to them that Christ established one church. It was the Catholic Church, and it wasn't until 1,500 years later that Martin Luther and John Calvin broke away and started the Protestant Reformation. And then since then, there's been 32,000 different Protestant churches with different names like Southern Baptist or Mennonite or Episcopal or Presbyterian or just non-denominational. You know, some guy just wants to start a church called the River of Life or Hope of Life or New Life or Bob Rice's church or Calvary Chapel or whatever it is. Well-meaning Christians just start churches. But it was the Catholic Church that Christ established, and we can prove that historically. And at the end, I'm going to give you some scriptures that you can show them as well. But this video is about why Protestants, for centuries, at least 200 centuries, did not believe in missionaries. And there were 3 main reasons. Number 1, John Calvin believed it was the state's responsibility, not the churches or not individual Christians, to convert people. You see, back during the Reformation, there were church states. There was no separation of church and state like we have today in America. So either you were a Protestant state or a Catholic state. Number 2, most of the reformers believed Christ was coming tomorrow. They thought he was really coming quickly because they reformed the church, and that's all they needed to do for Christ to come back. And number 3, they were Calvinists. And if you don't know what Calvinism believed, they believe in double predestination, which means before you're even born, God predestines you to either heaven or hell, and there is nothing you can do about it because you have no free will. As Martin Luther explained it, we're just like dumb horses, and either Satan's riding us or Jesus is riding us. We have no free will. This is what the Reformers taught, and this is what a lot of Protestants teach today, Presbyterians and Reformed generally, but I've also seen it become popular within Southern Baptist circles, which as a denomination, they teach free will, but individual preachers and many in the pews are starting to be deceived by this false teaching of Calvinism. So they were the 3 reasons. But thankfully, God, and you'll see in the scriptures, I'm going to read to you shortly, promise the church that the gates of hell will not prevail against them. And what the church has always believed from the beginning, from the 1st century until now, is that meant, even though there'll be saints and sinners, good guys and bad guys in the church, representing the church, God will prevent the church from error. And the error that the Protestants made during the Reformation of not sending missionaries, the Catholics did not fall into that error. In fact, during the Reformation time, when these guys were debating and talking their theology, well, God doesn't want us to evangelize because the church, it's the state's responsibility, not the church or the individuals. Or some would say, well, they're predestined to heaven or hell, so there's no need for us to evangelize. And some would say, oh, well, Christ is coming. Christ's coming is imminent. So while they were debating all this great theology they were figuring out, the church was sending out missionaries. They never stopped. In fact, one of the greatest missionaries of the church, St. Francis Xavier, went and evangelized India and China and had great missionary work in Asia, all over Asia during this time, because the church knew what the apostles taught. Because, see, evangelicals, Protestants, what have you, read their Bible like it's a law book, and they try and figure out the law, and each theologian and each individual comes up with their interpretation. Where the Catholic Church was blessed with authority from Christ, and I'm going to show you that in Scripture. And St. Paul said to Timothy, in 1 Timothy 3:15, the church is the pillar and foundation of truth. So the church gives us a truth. Okay? So if you ask an evangelical what's the pillar of truth, they would say the Bible. That's what I would have said for 25 years. But the Bible tells us it's the church. Now, of course, the Bible is true because the church gave us the Bible. And what church gave us the Bible? The Catholic Church. Because even if you listen to your own theologians and historians, they'll tell you that the New Testament wasn't established officially in the church until the Council of Carthage in 396 AD and 419 AD. And you can even Google Council of Carthage and see which books the Catholic Church said should be in the Bible. And the New Testament is the same for Protestants and Catholics. The only difference is that Martin Luther took out 7 of those books, and you can Google that and see the 7 he took out in the Old Testament. That's the only difference. So, although we both believe the Bible, we also believe the church who gave us the Bible, that never contradicts the Bible, because they gave us the Bible. It would be impossible to contradict the Bible, and it's impossible for the Bible to contradict the church. So, we knew that the church had authority. So, the church never wavered on missionaries like our Protestant brothers and sisters did. And if you're still not understanding what I mean by the church having authority, I'll tell you what Jesus said about the church having authority. Matthew chapter 16, verses 18 and 19. This is Jesus talking to Peter. And so I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock, the word Peter means rock. So he's saying, you are rock, and upon this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. This is what I'm saying. God's going to protect us from the gates of hell. So there will be no error. That's why the Catholic Church has never changed one single doctrine or dogma. They've changed some traditions, but not one single doctrine and dogma in 2,000 years. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. In the Old Testament, they understood when the master of an estate gave the keys to a servant, he was giving that servant authority over his estate while he was away on business or whatever reason. So Jesus is saying, I'm leaving, but I'm giving you, Peter, and your apostles the keys, the authority to my estate on earth. And whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So right there, as clear as day, Jesus is giving his apostle authority. And if you read the scriptures throughout, you see the authority was passed down through apostolic succession. And the Catholic Church is the only church that can prove apostolic succession. My priest today can show you historically, the guy who laid hands on him, his hands were laid on by someone else who ordained him, and it can trace to one of the apostles, the original apostles. How awesome is that? Now, before I forget, my Orthodox brothers can do this as well. Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. And they broke away about 1000 AD over political reasons, but they essentially are Catholic. They have essentially the same doctrines and dogmas as us. They just don't accept the Pope as their leader. They have different leaders for each church. But they believe, as we believe, all our doctrines and dogmas for 2,000 years. So, there you have it. Thank God the Catholic Church was protected by God, and we didn't fall into error. that our Protestant brothers fell into during the Reformation, where they didn't send out missionaries. And an interesting side note is, I used to love church history, and I used to love reading about Hudson Taylor, great missionary to China, Watchman Nee, another great missionary to China. And I never really thought about that these guys, these missionaries that I read about in Protestantism, evangelicalism, however you want to call it, only went back to like the 1800s. Because it was then during the revivals, Wesley, John Wesley, Charles Wesley, Finney, where these guys broke away from the Reformed thinking of predestination, double predestination, and they started believing in free will. And that's where the Pentecostal churches came in, and they believe in free will. Also, Wesleyan churches believe, Methodist churches. So when the churches started believing in free will in the 1800s, they started sending out missionaries again. But thankfully, the Catholic Church didn't have to go through that, because they never changed. They're the same. From the 1st century, there was the Catholic Church, no other church. The 10th century, there was the Catholic Church, no Baptists, no Pentecostals, all the way up to where we're at today. The Catholic Church hasn't changed. So share this with your Protestant friends. They may be enlightened, but like I said, you might have to explain to them they're Protestant, but it's no diss. I was Protestant for 25 years, been Catholic, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I'm losing count. One could be a little longer, give or take a year or two. But I'm thankful I'm Catholic again. And I just want to tell you, stay Catholic and evangelize. Because the church does teach that it's not the state. They've never believed that. Even when there was Catholic states, they never believed it was the Catholics, the state's responsibility. Church always taught it was the church and the individual Christian's responsibility to evangelize. So as a Catholic Christian, it's your duty to evangelize and win souls for Christ. God bless.